The first thing to say is that I really like the Don Siegel original. I'm a big fan of it. And I think, yes, it's absolutely true that it's an exploitation movie. I'm a big fan of exploitation movies. And this is a very, very different take on the story, despite the fact that the story actually follows fairly closely the parameters of the story as told in the film. Both of them obviously adapted, you quite rightly say that, from a novel by Thomas Cullinan. And Cullinan, how I don't know.
Cullinan, I think.
Cullinan. Coppola. And Tinnitus. Let's call the whole thing off. So what Sofia Coppola has said that she's trying to do is to tell the story from the women's point of view, although, I mean, it is arguable that in the previous versions it has been told from multiple points of view. There are particularly in the original, there's all these sort of voiceovers and, explanations in which the characters sort of start, wandering out loud. But in this, what it does is it absolutely centres on the group of women who were there at the Farnsworth Seminary for young ladies, and it's about the way in which they interact when Colin Farrell's character is brought into their midst. As before, central to it is the idea of who is beguiled, who's doing the beguiling, who is beguiled, who is, and that central mystery remains fundamentally true. Although you're quite right that in the same way as with the Clint Eastwood character, you take one look at Colin Farrell and he does that twinkly thing. He's brought in and he wakes up and he immediately starts being incredibly polite and has incredibly gracious manners and about how grateful he is, and he does that Colin Farrell twinkle thing, and you think, I'm not going to trust you.
As soon as you spotted Colin Farrell,
as far as I could throw
would you allow Colin Farrell into your seminary? Answer no.
Short of actually, yeah. But anyway, but I think he does that very well, and he plays that change between, on the one hand, starting out sort of being very narcissistic, and on the other hand, also feeling emasculated because he's injured, and playing the way in which he plays the characters off against each other, the way in which he tries to offer each one of them what he thinks will seduce them to his purpose. And I think he plays that very well. I think Nicole Kidman does a very good job of playing her cards close to her chest. Certainly the performance is very different from the performance that you get in the Siegel version. It's much more sort of understated. There is a certain steeliness to it, but it also has nuances. I think it's a very nuanced performance, although I think her accent wobbles a little bit. The real stellar performance is Kirsten Dunst, who plays this kind of constantly disappointed character, who has the countenance of somebody who is full of melancholy and loss and longing and has been betrayed in the past. And I think she plays that really well. You're looking at me. You don't think that was the case? You didn't feel that her character had all those things? You do?
Sorry, say that again.
That Kirsten Dunst's character feels like wells of melancholy.
Yes.
And yeah, fine. So you were listening to something else. That's why.
There was a lot going on at
I
that
see.
time.
Sorry. You were just giving me an absolutely blank stare, which I shouldn't.
It's my professional look.
I shouldn't make eye contact with you. And I think all those things are great. I love the the 1/66 frame, the way in which you get the texture of film. I love the thing at the beginning with coming down from the trees and the lens flare and the sort of gauzy, mossy, dreamy feel. However, I also think that there's a fundamental, shift which has occurred, which is that, to take away certainly if you watch the Siegel version, it's, there's incest and there's assault and there's, child abuse and it's very, very ripe. And it's absolutely got a 1 foot in the kind of, horror psychodrama camp. And personally, I like that about it. I like the fact that because I remember seeing it for the first time. I think I saw it at the Scala, and it was one of those things that was always on a double bill, and it was always a feature that people wanted to see. When Coppola says it's not that well known in America, I think it is pretty well known here. Most sort of film enthusiasts would know it pretty well here. There are some issues with that. Is that because the Beguiled, the original, the Siegel version, is so sort of full on. Yes, there are things about it that you might wince at nowadays, but it also has a kind of a really sort of lean, mean feel to it. In the case of this, it feels much more like a fairy tale. It's something which you raised in the interview. There is this fairy tale sense to it. It's kind of princesses in towers, and in comes this. He may be prince, he may be wolf. And also what that does is it dehistoricizes it. I mean, it's quite right talking about the idea that the Civil War is background noise. I mean, in the Siegel, you have these images of the Civil War and the battlefield is thrown back to you. You see flashbacks to the battle. It's absolutely there. In this version, this is like it's happening in a kind of timeless netherworld. And it's much more something that feels like it has an archetypal fairy tale quality to it than anything that actually has to do with the Civil War. I'm not sure that I agree that the defense about taking out the character of Hallie is, that there wasn't a way of doing that in a way which would have made that character strong. Actually, in the original, in the Siegel version, that character played by Mae Mercer is terrifically strong, has many of the best lines in the film, and is one of the very few presences in the film that actually understands what's going on, not just in the house but outside of the house, and is a voice that I think could easily have been adapted for this film. But I do think that it has a kind of dreamy, enchanted style that's kind of seductive. It's very much part and parcel of Coppola's, what she described herself as the box set. If you look at all her films together, they return to certain themes, and absolutely, timeless, apolitical, ahistorical is what she does. And if you're somebody who is seduced by that side of her filmmaking, then I think with this you will get absolutely what you expect. I can imagine. There's one very particular fan of the Siegel version who wasn't sitting next to me when I was watching the film. I could almost hear him going, "What? What?" But I do like this version. But I have to say I have a fondness for the Siegel version, which I think is longer term.